Hello, I'm Kads, and welcome to today's video. So today, we're going to be talking about the Easter fusion for Razelvarg, a pretty fast and speedy rabbit champion. This fusion is a traditional style fusion, meaning you have to obtain 16 of the rares, fuse them into the epics, and fuse the epics into the legendary, and you have a fixed amount of time to do that while participating in all of the respective events. Generally speaking, there is an advantage to saving the summons for a champ chase because it is worth 500 points. However, I think in this case, it won't end during a champion chase, therefore you might not have to worry about that. And also bear in mind that it does cost money to fuse, so don't be short on silver when the last days come around. But before we get too deep into my fusion plan, let's talk about the fusion champion himself. Is he good? Is he even worth pursuing? Honestly, for starters, I give him a solid B. He's okay. I don't really see a purpose for him in the game currently, but that does not mean that he might not have a purpose in the future. So if we go through his abilities here, on the A1, attacks one enemy 3 times, and it'll fill his turn meter by 5% for each hit, so 15% turn meter fill with every A1. On the A2, AoE attack, 100% chance of placing leech, and he'll heal himself by 10% of his own max HP for each leech placed by the skill. So if there are 5 enemies, he places 5 leeches, he'll heal himself by half HP, which is pretty substantial on a 3-turn cooldown. And the Moneymaker ability here is the A3, where he also attacks all enemies, but he places increased speed and increased accuracy on all allies before attacking. This is on a 3-turn cooldown. Now, all of his abilities do scale with attack and speed, so he's some sort of hybrid champion where some of his multipliers will be based on the speed that he gets to, not just his base speed. And gets to is important because his passive here, when he places increased speed on allies or himself, he increases his speed by 5 up to 100. So he will end up being 100 speed faster by the end of whatever round or enemy you're fighting. The aura here is speed in all battles by 20%. Base speed's pretty fast at 105. I believe his base HP is around 15k, so kind of middle of the road for an attack-based champion. And his base attack, not shown here, is around 1500-ish. So pretty decent stats overall for an AoE nuker. But like I said, his kit is cool. He can place leeches. He can do things. I think the best use case I've seen for him is in a provoke set for Hydra, so he can go pretty fast. You get a triple hitter in the A1, so you could get 3 chances for the set bonus to pop off on the head of Decay, and then you also have 2 AoEs here where you're always going to be hitting the head of Decay. And so considering that he will be, 300 and something speed by the end of his passive ramping up, he could do some decent work for some of you if you need a champion who can really lock down the head of Decay, but also provide an AoE leech so the rest of your team can heal up. So he can definitely work in that niche, but outside of that, I don't really see a huge use for him. And if you have someone like a Nekmo or anything similar like that who can also be in a provoke set who brings more than just leech and increased speed, then you're better off using that champion. But if you don't have one, then this can be like a super budget Nekmo, for example, in a taunting set. In addition to the Fusion Legendary, we do also have the Fusion Epic here, which is Delaja. I don't know how to say that. Delaja? Let's go with Delaja, who's an epic Lizard Man HP-based champion. Has a pretty decent kit, and she will be helpful for sure for faction wars if that's where you're struggling. On the A1, she can play some poisons and heal herself. She has a AoE decreased attack, 100% chance, which is going to be helpful against certain faction wars bosses. And then she can also be your healer, 4-turn cooldown, 1 continuous heal on all allies, and a shield based on her max HP. She also has a 50% chance of counterattacking when an ally is attacked, and so she can play some more poisons and heal herself, particularly good in the Faction Wars crypt. Lastly, we do have the Fusion Rare, who's nothing really to write home about. He is relatively tanky, HP based as well, 90k on the HP, so pretty tanky, but he is a rare, so their utility will never, well, not never, but you rarely scales all the way into the end game. So on the A1 here, you can place a continuous heal on the ally with the lowest HP, and you'll see this as a theme throughout, that he just does the weak version of everything, as you'd expect for a rare, so he's just probably not worth investing in long term, but nonetheless, he kind of has that passive where he can place a continuous heal, a weak version on an ally with the lowest HP whenever after he attacks. He can also provoke on a 70% chance, three times at random. So he can probably work for like Magma Dragon type things if you're really early on and you just want to slap a little bit of gear on him. Use your rare tomes maybe, because on a 3-turn cooldown it's pretty reliable, I would say, as far as 70% chance. So he can help in the early game for that purpose. And then you can also do ally protection, increased defense, both of the weak versions on a 4-turn cooldown. So again, he doesn't really scale to the end game, but maybe if you have him in the early game, he can be helpful if you're really struggling with Magma Dragon. So with all that out of the way, let's hop over to my fusion plan for Razelvarg, which I contain here in the spreadsheet, and I will link that in the description below. And I also do have the respective sheets for the previous handful of fusions as well, if you want to check those out and compare. So as you can see here, we have all the events lined up based on their days. We also have the potion keeps, which are relevant for this because he is a traditional fusion. So if you have not prepared all the potions, you're going to need to farm them on their respective days to be able to get them in order to fuse the rares and or the epic champions. I also have the CVC, which should be in a couple of weeks or a week and a half, give or take. And we also have the shard events, which we now know that, or we know now that the 10x is going on. We have 2x, we should have 2x sacreds coming up in the following weekend, and then fusion will close out with another 10x for a different subset of champions. So this is a pretty standard fusion profile. We have 1 tournament for each of the dungeons. We have 2 classic arena tournaments, a champion training tournament going on right now. We have a champion chase tournament. We have 3 divers, 3 ardent hants. We have a champion training event, 5-day, and then we have the dreaded summon rush. So there are a couple of noteworthy items that stand out for this fusion in particular, one of which is that the dungeon divers has appeared to have returned to the old values of around 2850 for a 3-day event. If we scroll down back to Pythion here, you can see that they've kind of ventured up to 3350 for a 3-day, and even if you scaled that up, you would end up with about 4450 for a 4-day event. So that's the more recent trend as far as dungeon divers are concerned, which are relatively painful to accomplish. But at least for now, the one that we can see is back down to 2850, which is where it should be in my opinion, but that's a lot better than usual. Another thing that is noteworthy is that we're going to have a massive pinch point here where we have the overlap of the entirety of the champion training event and 2 separate dungeons. So this is going to be a huge energy sink during that duration, or during that time, if you are pursuing the fusion. Now it will be a lot less if you are not maxing out the champion training event like I normally do when I'm going for legendary tomes that are usually at the end around 14,750 points. It'll be a lot easier if you're not doing that, but for someone like me who is a tome chaser, that's going to be a major pinch point where I'm going to have to manage my energy efficiently to be able to do at least 3,000 points for champion training a day, while also maintaining about 750 points a day for each of the dungeon tournaments. So the last thing that is noteworthy is the overlapping of the shard events. This can be quite painful if you don't know how to prepare appropriately, but you will require sacreds for both events if you choose to do so. So this is a predicted value. Anything with an asterisk is predicted, and I'll put it in parentheses if it's what I actually did for myself. But I'm assuming that the champion chase will be pretty standard par for the course, around 2,500 points, which could cost up to 10 sacreds on its own. If you're just purely unlucky, you get 0 legendaries whatsoever. However, I will recommend in that case that by the time we get to the champion chase, you should have earned at least 8 of the rares, and thus you could summon 2 of the fusion epics, which are 250 points a piece, or 2 sacreds, 500 points. And so you can effectively reduce the cap, if you're willing to go this way, to 8 sacreds, assuming you pull 2 of the fusion epics. Obviously, if you summon any previous fragment summon or something like that, you will also get those points as well, and that can help reduce the amount of sacreds you'll have to use. But the main thing to talk about here is that the summon rush itself offers the chance once again to get an epic if you want to spend 9 to 10 sacreds, depending on your willingness to pull mystery shards, and you can then skip other events, because you will have gotten the epic, which means you can skip 4 of the rares, including the champion chase altogether, meaning you can pull 9 to 10 sacreds and be done with the entire event, which is probably more optimal considering that you don't want to use that many sacreds. That would minimize the usage of sacreds, let me put it that way. But the way I'm doing it, like I said, is get 2 of the fusion epics, pull up to 8 sacreds depending on the RNG of getting legendaries, and then I will have spent 4 sacreds, which I'll pull in a video later today, but I will pull 4 sacreds and some mystery shards to get to the base value of 2150 for that rare. So in total, I will spend up to 12 sacreds. However, if you just focus the summon rush and then you took credit for that epic and you skipped 4 of the events, including the champion chase, then you'd only have to pull 10 sacreds. So that would be more sacred efficient. As usual, on the bottom here, I do put my personal energy plan. This is not a recommendation. This is just how I expect to spend my energy over the course of the fusion. So of course, we're starting off with the champion training tournament that's already going on, fusing into dragon as it's going on. I waited until the second day of dragon because the dungeon divers were starting, so I wanted to get more points from that. We'll transition into ice golem. There's a bit of a lull here in the middle, which usually is when they have some sort of challenge tournament. They usually don't, there's usually not just a dead area of events or no events, so there might be some special Fire Knight tournament or Spider tournament or something like that going on right there. But if not, I will be happy to spend the day doing Minotaur. So either or. Then we move on to the pinch point of the champion training event, overlapping with the Fire Knight and the Spider tournaments. And then we finish off with Spider. And since there is a Dungeon Divers going on near the end, I just put in Fire Knight for me because that's just the most desirable dungeon for me to be farming. But this could literally be any of the 4 dungeons. Pick your poison based on what you want to do to be able to complete the last Dungeon Divers event. In the adjacent tab here, I do also have a fusion potion calculator where you can see for Razelvarg, we have 16 force rares and we have 4 spirit epics, and that equates to these totals as far as the potions you will need to complete the fusion. So you can pause the video, take a screenshot, whatever you need, or download or open the link for the spreadsheet in the description box down below, and you can see this for yourself, compare that to how many potions you have, and ensure that you can actually complete the fusion. And if you do not have enough, then again, take stock of the potion keeps and when they're open, and when you need to jump in there, farm some potions, and get those champions ascended. So with that, since we are on day 3 of the fusion, let's talk about where I am and what's going on currently in the game. As usual, I do like to mention my silver count prior to artifact enhancement events, as well as my gem count at the start of a fusion, just so you can see that those resources are maintained throughout, but I'm willing to spend them as needed depending on the events, particularly in instances where we have a lot of pinch points. That's when I tend to spend the most gems. So 28 million on the silver and just under 4,500 on the gems. As far as current events goes, in the champion training tournament, I already finished that in the first couple of days. Primary focus on that. So it was 6,200 points for the ancient shard. I could have stopped at 5,000, but an extra 1,000 for an ancient shard, why not? I usually don't go for the epic tomes anymore just because I'm so far into the end game. I have 150 epic books. I don't really need them anymore. So if I don't need to champion train someone, then I usually just go for rewards that match. So champion training is done. Therefore, my focus is currently on the dragon tournament, which is ending later tonight, my time, and I'm about 400 points short. So once reset happens, we get all the daily energy that we normally get. I should be able to get that without having to spend any extra resources, and I will be stopping here once again at 2250, just enough to get the rare. There is also the classic arena takedown, which has started today, and it's pretty standard, 390 points, which should be done in literally a day or just using your basic refills, as long as you're in gold or silver. Bronze, it might be a bit of a struggle, but most of us, majority of the players in the game, end up somewhere around gold once you get out of the early game. So these are never an issue, and it should be pretty easy. And don't be afraid to try and compete for a top spot. It's only 5-star relentless, but 5-star is better than 0 stars. So spend a little bit of extra resources if you can, or just save your refills until classic arena takedowns, and you might be able to walk away with some relentless. So mini tip there. Coinciding with the dragon and the champion training tournaments, we do also have a dungeon divers event going on where I'm at 1,500 points and I'm just about 1,300 short, and we have another day and a half or so of dungeon diving to be able to get that done. So I'm not too worried, and if I need to, I'll spend some extra energy, extra gems, whatever, to ensure that I get all the way down to the 2850 to get the rare. We do also have an artifact enhancement that just started, and unfortunately we do have the 4775 requirement here, so roughly 25 million silver if you're kind of starting from scratch. And if you're doing some of the hybrid methods of gear cleansing, where you're leveling stuff to level 12 or 8 to see if it's good and selling it to get some silver back, or rolling stuff up from 12 to 16, 15 to 16, stuff that I will be doing a little bit later, then you can just spend your silver, minimize how much you lose, and try to get all the way up to 4775. You will make it back by farming dungeons and doing campaigns, so don't worry too much. You don't need to have 75 million silver up front in order to do a fusion. You just need to make sure that you have enough by the time artifact enhancement comes back around. And lastly, we do have the dreaded summon rush. You can already see here that I've pre-pulled to just about 150 points, and then later today I'll be pulling my 4 sacreds, and so I will be getting all the way up to 2150 over the course of the next 2 days, and then that rare will be complete. I will not be going for the epic, but again, if you want to minimize the amount of total sacreds you use overall, if you're assuming you're exclusively using sacreds, obviously you could use whatever shards you want for a champion chase tournament, but for summon rushes, you do want to tend towards the higher point shards. But if you are going that way, it will be less sacreds overall if you just spend the 10 on the epic and skip the champion chase altogether. Alrighty, so that's going to do it for today's video. Once again, the Fusion Plan spreadsheet will be linked in the description box down below if you want to take a look at it and use it as a reference for yourself. Hopefully you found this video helpful, and if so, be sure to hit that like button down below. If you enjoyed this video, then be sure to hit that subscribe button also down below. It's been a while since I've mentioned it, but we are close to 600 subscribers and we're still on the road to 1,000. So if you want to join the crew, then be sure to hit that subscribe button down below. Thanks for watching and have a good one.